So definitely CTV in the industry is seen as something that's, quite premium, a lot like linear TV, where quite honestly, fraud isn't a thing in that space. So what we have done over the last really 2.5 years at DV is launch a set of solutions that can track and monitor fraud in the CTV space. And what we've seen over the time is that, 2018 budgets weren't huge in the CTV space, and the associated fraud was still pretty low. But what we saw in 2019 was basically the fraud started in like early 2019. And then by Q4 of 2019, fraud really started to kind of explode. And this has really continued into 2020. We've detected something like a 161% increase in fraudulent impressions just from January to April of this year versus last year. So it's this huge swelling of fraud. Basically, the bad actors have figured out what to do. They see the budgets, and so they are acting.
So where does that surface? Where does that bad action surface, and on what kind of media?
Yeah, it's for CTV in general. It's obviously the video space because that's where the key buy is. It can be mostly, what we see is a lot of the open marketplace. There's definitely fraud there, but it's not just in the open space. We do see, unfortunately, bad actors that make their way into kind of buys that are packaged together. We definitely aren't detecting that much fraud at the like super premium level where, it's a premium brand only selling their own inventory. But what we find is a lot of times publishers can open up their inventory sources to not just be their owned and operated environments. So a lot of our clients are basically using our technology to see exactly where their ads are serving. And so they're finding that the ads are serving in environments that they aren't necessarily expecting. So they do a buy with, publisher X. They then land in 30 different apps. 25 of those might be premium, 5 of those might not be premium. And so this is kind of where we're detecting this fraud. So kind of how it works in terms of the fraud itself, what we see is 3 different kind of big types of fraud in CTV. First, it's around fraudulent apps themselves. So it's actually pretty easy for anyone to release apps. Myself, I could theoretically go online, pay someone $100, release an app. And what we find is that a lot of these bad actors are packaging together kind of like old school, almost like black and white television content that is theoretically accepted by app stores, but they essentially don't have viewers because it's such old content, and they just layer in these fraudulent impressions into their apps. So it's these kind of like fraudulent apps are a huge thing. DV detected over 500 in Q1 alone, and we're at something like 1,300 at this point for just CTV. So that's obviously the big issue. The second big issue is what I consider as server farms. So in the connected TV realm, most of the ad calls are done server-based. They're done in the cloud versus in desktop and mobile. Most of the calls are done on your mobile device, your desktop device itself. And that kind of client-side nature is a little harder to scale versus connected TV space. Everything is done in the cloud. It's a lot better for users because it's that more seamless advertising experience where you don't have weird ad breaks between the content and ad. So it's a better experience, but it's also easier for the fraudsters to manipulate. So they can just essentially purchase, server rack space somewhere, fire off tons of fraudulent calls, and they basically pass it off as this server-side ad insertion technology. So it's important for all of us to be aware of that and detect what is real server-based technology, which is amazing. I will say that, but there are all these bad actors that we have to be cognizant of. And then the last kind of CTV fraudulent type of inventory that we see is around spoofing. This can actually be desktop and mobile display inventory that bad actors buy. They then behind the scenes can change the ad calls and resell it as CTV video inventory. So this is probably the most advanced type of fraud that we see. And it's kind of crazy. The advertisers themselves, they buy this CTV video inventory. They're, ordinarily, they can't detect it. They think their video ad ran. But what we and DV and others in our industry are able to detect is that this isn't an actual video ad. It's a display ad, nothing at all related to what they bought. So those are like the three most common and scary things we see in the industry. Brand safety is interesting. An IAB just released a report, I think it was just a day or two ago, where video buyers are ranking brand safety as essentially their number one concern. And it makes perfect sense for just 2020 alone, let alone the grander picture. Unfortunately, in the CTV space, brand safety is almost nil. Most of the advertisers that are buying CTV inventory, they don't know what apps they're running in. They don't know the content they're running with. They kind of just hope it's premium, or they've done a deal with a publisher that they think is pretty premium, and they don't know exactly where it's serving. So, and unfortunately, that's a huge issue. DV, this is our huge goal for 2020. We've already released functionality that allows our clients to report on the apps that they're actually running in. So that's a great step forward. We're releasing in the next month or two technology that will basically allow the advertisers to really ensure their apps are running, their ads are running in the apps they want. So they can, do an exclusion list, make sure that they aren't running in, the bad apps out there. And then we're hoping by the end of the year to get to content level transparency as well. So, okay, you've got this app. What actual content did you run with? Can you exclude anything that's too risque? This just isn't possible in CTV today. So that's the big goal for the year.